year ago, I sat here and told you about The Housemaid's Secret, which was the follow-up to The Housemaid by Frieda McFadden. And today I'm here to tell you about the third book in that series, The Housemaid is Watching, which I did not think I was going to read, but I did cave and I did read it. Today I'm going to help you answer the question, should you read this one? If you would like an in-depth review and spoilers for both The Housemaid and The Housemaid's Secret, I will have that video I did last year linked down below. I talked extensively about both of these books, what happens in them, and what I thought about them, so you can check that out in that video before you watch this one if you would like. But in today's video, I'm going to be talking exclusively about The Housemaid is Watching, which is the third book in this series, and I fear it will not be the last. Was this book needed? No, it was not needed. But it exists, and I was having a rough reading month anyways, and I was looking for something kind of easy to read. I forgot this book even came out, and then I was like, you know, it's probably gonna make it on the Goodreads Choice Awards. It might even win the Goodreads Choice Awards, so I might as well go ahead and knock it out. It's on Kindle Unlimited. Why not? If you're familiar with the premise of the series, it kicks off with a housemaid named Millie who has a mysterious past. She starts working for this family, and the family has some weird vibes as well, and then you learn everything that's going on, and it turns out Millie has killed someone before. She did it in self-defense for her friend who was being assaulted by this man. She killed this man, she went to jail for it, and now she's found herself in this situation where the family she's working for, the husband is abusive, and so she helps the wife kill the man. After this book, Millie becomes known in the community for being able to help wives get out of abusive situations and going to extreme lengths to do so, including killing people. And so in the second book, you follow her with a different family where the wife seems to be in a situation where she's being abused, but there's some plot twists, some things happen. Like I said, all the details are in that video that I did before. In The Housemaid is Watching, you're following Millie approximately a decade after the events of the second book in the series. She is now married to Enzo, and they have two children together, an 11-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. The synopsis of the book does not give much away about what this book is about, but essentially they're moving into a new neighborhood. They're finally getting the house of their dreams, but there's weird vibes in the neighborhood. As far as my non-spoilery thoughts about this book, I'll give all of that first before jumping into full spoilers of what happens in this book. It was not good. It was not good. It was about 50% of just really suburban build-up. Some pretty obvious things play out, and Millie continues to become an increasingly more boring character as these books go on. That was one of my biggest complaints with the second book in the series, is Millie is such an interesting character in the first book. In the second book, she just comes across so naive and so uninteresting, which makes no sense because she really should be developing on her character. And in this book, I had the exact same problems. We're 3 books in, we're not developing on her character. What are we doing? The first book in the series, I gave a 5-star. The second book, I gave a 3.5-star. And this one, I'm giving a 2. It does seem like Frieda McFadden has been pumping out books at an increased rate since she has gained popularity. And I don't blame her for that. If I was an author and I was getting the numbers and the sales that she was, I would probably be doing the exact same thing. But it does end up having an effect on the quality of the books that are coming out, because I feel like when I first was introduced to Frieda McFadden's works, I was really enjoying them. And then as they go on, I'm liking them less and less. They feel rushed. The plots feel forced, the characters don't feel engaging, they're not as fun and surprising and readable as they feel like they were when I first started reading her books, and they're just simply not books that I would recommend picking up. So if you're someone who just does not want to pick this up and you have FOMO and you just want the details, I'm happy to be that person for you who just gives you all the spoilers. I'll tell you everything that happens in this book, and then we'll talk about my spoilery thoughts about the book. Okay, I'm not going to tell you everything that happens in this book, because there's a scene in this book that specifically focuses on one of the characters, how they pick up silverware and sit it on the table. There's just some stuff that did not matter. So I'm not going to tell you everything, but I'll tell you the main gist, everything you need to know. So opening up in part 1 of this book, we have Millie, who is now married to Enzo. They have an 11-year-old daughter named Ada and a 9-year-old son named Nico. They are moving into this new neighborhood in this house that they can barely afford because this is just what they wanted to do. They're moving to Long Island and they're feeling really proud of this accomplishment, but then they start to meet their neighbors and the vibes are kind of weird. One of their neighbors is named Suzette. She is a real estate agent and her husband is named Jonathan. They have another neighbor named Jan, Janice, who is an older woman who has a son named Spencer, who is roughly looking the same age as Nico. Janice is kind of a weirdo. She doesn't want Nico to play with her son Spencer unless she can see Nico's vaccination records. So she's a little weird, and she tells Millie to worry about Suzette, especially around her own husband. But Millie doesn't know these people. She doesn't know who to trust. Also to note, Suzette has a maid named Martha. Enzo is a landscaper. He starts spending a lot of time over at Suzette's house in her backyard doing yard work for her, and increasingly through the first half of this book, Millie is continuing to grow suspicious of all the time he is spending with Suzette and in Suzette's backyard. She feels like she can trust her husband and that he wouldn't cheat on her, but the vibes are definitely off. Their son Nico ends up breaking a window in Suzette's house when he's playing baseball, and so then they set up a little arrangement where he's going to go over to her house to do chores to make up for it because they cannot afford to replace the window. And then Martha starts cleaning for Millie one day a week, so everyone's getting intertwined in this neighborhood. Millie catches Martha trying to go through her things and potentially steal from her, so Millie doesn't want Martha in her house anymore. She also senses that Martha knows about her past, and that makes her uncomfortable. Really randomly, Millie finds out she has high blood pressure. This is one of those things that just felt so forced in the plot, but she has high blood pressure. Nico ends up stopping doing chores for Suzette because he breaks a plate in their house. They don't want him there anymore, and so he stops going over there to do chores. One day, Enzo and Millie come home. They can't find their kids, and it turns out that they're in this secret room that's in the house, and their daughter has been crying. Then Nico starts acting out. He punches a kid at school and gets suspended. And all throughout this first half, Millie is continuing to doubt her husband. She keeps thinking about how she doesn't really know the full truth of his past and if he's ever killed someone, and that's just making her really paranoid in this whole situation. Finally, Millie catches Martha actually stealing from her, and so she fires her from cleaning her house. Martha admits that she does know about Millie's criminal past and threatens her and says, "Please don't tell Suzette or I'll tell her about your criminal past," and Millie agrees. Nico ends up punching another kid when he is playing Little League Baseball, so he is just going through something and he gets kicked off the team. A plumber arrives one day to Millie's house, who apparently had come to her house a couple days before, and he says, "Hey, the check you wrote me bounced." Millie ends up looking into her bank accounts. She realizes Enzo has drawn $1,000 out of their account. She confronts him about it, and he says it's for broken equipment for his job, but she's still a little suspicious. Meanwhile, Enzo keeps spending all this time in Suzette's backyard, and then now all of a sudden they're gonna have a beach day together because Suzette's a real estate agent, and so she works with homeowners a lot. So she has been apparently setting Enzo up with clients to do landscaping for, and now they have some client meeting that's gonna take place on the beach, which makes absolutely no sense. But Millie's like, "I think we should make it a family day and we should all go to the beach." And so they all go to the beach together, but as soon as they get to the beach, they're like, "Oh, the client canceled." And so you're like, what? Why were they ever going to the beach? Anyway, they have a beach day. Suzette almost drowns. Enzo saves her. Also at the beach, you finally start to get a sense of Jonathan and his marriage to Suzette and how weirdly complacent he seems to be at following her every order, because he was gonna go swim, but then she tells him like, "Oh, I don't think you wanna swim." So he's like, "Okay, I guess I won't swim." Just weird vibes. Then one night, Millie's asleep. She wakes up. She hears Enzo pulling into the driveway. When he gets into bed, she can smell a woman's perfume on him. So she is convinced that he is cheating. And then one day he's not home when she thinks he should be. So she's like, "I am going over to Suzette's and I'm gonna find him and I'm going to confront him." She goes into Suzette's house, and what she finds is Jonathan dead with his throat cut on the floor. Cue part 2 of the book. Millie rushes home. Enzo is washing blood off of his hands. He said he cut himself while he was doing some yard work. She's like, "Listen, I don't know if I can believe you or not, but I need you to wash your hands. I need you to get rid of your shirt. Even if you did kill that man, I can't have you going to jail. Clean up. 911 is on the way." The cops start questioning them. They look like obvious suspects, and they really narrow in on Enzo. Millie decides to reach out to their old friend, Detective Benito Ramirez, who is from the previous books. He is a detective who knows about what Millie and Enzo have done for other women in the past, and he is a resource and ally to them. He is also, I guess, the godfather of their children. So they call him and they're like, "Hey, the cops are suspicious of us. I don't think Enzo did it, but like, I don't know. What do you think?" And he's like, "Listen, just talk to the cops, cooperate. Everything's gonna be okay." Everything was not okay. The cops find out that Enzo recently bought a gun, and also that Suzette and Jonathan had just taken out big life insurance policies. So it's really looking like Enzo was sleeping with Suzette and they killed Jonathan to get the money. It's not looking good. Also, earlier in the book, Enzo at one point was talking to Millie about them getting life insurance policies. So then you're like, oh, weird things are happening. Finally, Millie confronts Enzo and she's like, be straight up with me. What is going on? I do not understand. Like, did you kill the guy? Are you cheating on me? What is happening? Because she also finds out from the police that he had checked into a motel a couple nights ago with a woman. They assumed it was Suzette. He's like, listen, I checked into that motel with Martha. You're like, Martha? Martha was Suzette's maid. And then he tells her this story about how Martha was being abused by her husband. He saw the bruises on Martha. He figured it all out. That's why she was stealing from them, because she was trying to get enough money so that she could leave her husband. That's why he bought a gun so he could give it to Martha. That's why he was at the hotel with her. And he didn't want to tell Millie any of this because of her high blood pressure. She's like, I guess I just have to accept this story for the truth. I'm still gonna be skeptical, but I'm gonna trust my husband. Detective Ramirez ends up visiting them and he's like, I've got a lawyer for you. And who is it? It is Cecilia, all grown up. Cecilia is the kid from the first book in the series. She's now 27 years old and she is this amazing lawyer. And so she decides to help them out. And then you get this whole other story that really doesn't particularly matter that much about how the detective is really narrowing in on Enzo because he knows Enzo used to work with this guy named Dario Fontana, who is the man that Enzo did kill in his past. You do find out Enzo killed this guy, and it's a guy that was dating his sister or even married to his sister and then would abuse his sister, and then his sister ended up dying, and so he killed this guy. But before he killed that guy, he worked for that guy, and that guy's a mobster. So basically Enzo was in a mob for a while, and somehow the detective must know, and that's why he's narrowing in on him. But none of that really particularly matters that much. There's also this whole part of the case where they're like, Enzo must have been the murderer because the other neighbor, Janice, who's always snooping on people, is the one who made the 911 call, and she said she didn't see anyone go in the house except for Enzo. But they're like, well, what if there's a back entrance and a way to get in the back? So Millie's like, I'm gonna go over to Suzette's and see if that's true, if there is a back entrance. And when she goes snooping in Suzette's backyard, she ends up running into Suzette herself. So one, she does confirm there is a back entrance to Suzette's house because that is the entrance that Suzette took to avoid the press who are all around her house. And two, Suzette ends up telling her, Enzo was obsessed with me. Which does not seem believable, but okay. Then Millie goes to visit Martha. She goes to her house and all she finds is her husband, and her husband says that Martha has been gone. So that appears to validate Enzo's story about helping Martha get out of her abusive marriage. Then the police end up searching Millie and Enzo's home, and unfortunately they do find a pocket knife with Jonathan's blood on it. And so now Enzo is going to be arrested. During all this time, you also find out that Nico, their son, you thought he was going and playing with that kid Spencer all this time. Anytime he would leave the house, he was just telling his parents he was playing with Spencer. Millie recently found out that they have not played together in a long time. So she's like, where the heck has Nico been going? So Nico's looking a little suspicious. Then they find the pocket knife with blood in their house. And then Enzo confesses to the murder and he gets arrested. This is all leading you to believe that, okay, Nico was acting out. Did something happen? Did he kill Jonathan for some reason? And Enzo was covering for him. But plot twisterinos, Millie is talking to Ada, putting her to bed, and Ada confesses that she killed Jonathan. And you're like, what? And then part 3 gives Ada's POV, and you go back to the beginning and you see what's been going on. Keep in mind, Ada is an 11-year-old girl, and she was struggling to adjust in this move, adjusting to a new home. Her and her brother were kind of struggling in their relationship as well because they used to share a room and now they're not. And then Nico starts going through all these things, but Nico's not talking to her about it, and she's trying to connect with him. She's also having a hard time at school where all these boys just like keep trying to date her and asking if they can like get married and kiss, and she's like, I am not interested, and they will not leave her alone and will not stop harassing her. She's also spending a lot of time thinking about a young boy about the age of Nico who went missing from this same town a couple years ago, which is a very minor detail that I think Janice tells Millie at the very beginning briefly or something, but almost never comes back up. And now it's coming back up and you're like, okay, that's gonna be important. So Ada's like, what's going on with Nico? And finally he confesses to her what's been going on. When he initially went over to do chores at Suzette's house, he wasn't doing chores. He found this secret room in their house, just like the secret room that he has in his own house. And Jonathan was having him go in that room where he's got all these nice toys and having him play with these toys and watching him over a camera, saying that he was like gonna invent a toy and he wanted to like see how Nico played with toys. Very creepy, very disgusting. Suzette found out and made him stop coming over, but Jonathan was like, no, you have to secretly keep coming over. And he said he was gonna kill his family if he told anyone. Horrible. Meanwhile, while Ada's been struggling at school, one day her dad was picking her up from school and found this boy like harassing her and like holding her wrist. And so then he talked to her and is like, here's how you have to approach it. Like, you got to protect yourself. He's feeling guilt about that because he didn't protect his sister fully, which is why that whole piece of his story is like kind of important, but whatever. And so he ends up giving Ada his pocket knife and is like, if anyone is ever doing something and not listening to you, you put this in their gut and you twist it and you finish them off. Is that a good idea? I don't know. I don't have an 11-year-old daughter, so I don't know what I would do in that situation. But clearly that ended up leading to a situation because Jonathan's now dead. So after Nico confessed to Ada, she's like, I'm gonna go talk to Jonathan and I'm gonna threaten him so he never messes with my brother again. She goes over there, she finds a secret room. Jonathan finds her in the secret room, confronts her. She also found like dried blood on a bed that was in there, and he's clearly not gonna let her leave. So she does indeed stab him in the gut, twist it, and runs away. She confesses all that to her mother. Her mom's like, interesting, Jonathan died because his throat was slit. Like, I guess Ada just omitted that detail, but you as the reader are like, okay, so someone else finished him off. Like, we're gonna get another plot twist for that. In the final part of the story, switches back to Millie's perspective. Enzo's in jail. They're trying to figure out what they're gonna do. The investigation continues and they did find Suzette's fingerprints in that room. So Millie's like, oh my God, Suzette knew what was going on. They also found DNA for that missing boy. And so she's like, wow, this family sucks. Her and Ramirez go and visit Suzette and they're like, listen, you can either confess to Jonathan's murder so that Enzo can get off, or we're gonna pin this child's murder on you, which is gonna be way worse. So she decides to confess to Jonathan's murder. Enzo gets out of jail and it's a happily ever after question mark. But then you get an epilogue, and that's Martha's perspective, Martha the maid. You get an interesting-ish kind of reveal that Martha has known Millie since Millie was a teen. When Millie first killed the first guy she killed, who was assaulting her friend, Martha was the maid for that boy's family. So she's known Millie for a long time. She knew Millie went to jail. That's how she's known Millie her whole life. Earlier, you did find out from Enzo that Martha like wanted to talk to Millie and get help from Millie to get out of her abusive relationship, but every time she looked at Millie, she just like froze up and couldn't talk. So now you're like, okay, I see how like she wanted to get help from Millie. Also, you know, Martha was stealing things to get money, and right at the end, she's the one who goes back to Suzette's house because she's gonna steal some things so that she can sell them to get money right when she's getting ready to leave her husband. But then Jonathan confronts her. He's already been stabbed in the gut. She picks up a letter opener and cuts his throat. So that is everything that happened in full spoilery detail. Now, how I felt about it in spoilery detail, to give you a little bit more information than I did in the non-spoilery section, I felt like there were several points in the story where things just felt overly convenient or overly obvious of what was going on. I will say Ada being the one who killed Jonathan was a surprise to me because they are leading you so much to believe that it was Nico who did something. So that twist did surprise me a little bit. But as soon as it's revealed that she stabbed him in the gut, I'm like, okay, it had to be someone else. Who else do we have in the story? It was either Janice or Martha. Seems like it was probably Martha. It was Martha. I also felt like there were so many points in this book where it felt like the plot was being so forced. Like the next step in the story just felt so unnatural and unauthentic for some reason. Like it felt like the plot was driving the story versus the characters and the things that make sense for them driving the story. When you get these random scenes when like you find out Millie has high blood pressure and that's all because it has to be used as an excuse for Enzo later when he's like, well, that's why I didn't tell you about what was going on with Martha, even though we've saved many women together as a team. This time I just decided to hide it from you because I don't know, you have high blood pressure. Like stuff like that felt so forced and strange and unnatural. And so much of this book felt so boring because the first 50% is just this like living in the suburbs, the kids are having a hard time and she thinks her husband's cheating on her. And it took so long to get to something happening. It was just not a very good time. I'm also a little bit confused why this is called The Housemaid is Watching. Is the housemaid supposed to be Millie? Is it supposed to be Martha? There's just no obvious explanation for me for why it was called that. If anyone was watching anyone in the story, it was Janice, the nosy neighbor, and she's not a housemaid. So that was a little bit confusing to me. And overall, it just didn't feel like a satisfying addition to the series. Millie is so boring the whole time. She's like, oh, I think my husband might be cheating on me. Weird. I think he might be cheating on me. I'm cooking dinner. I don't know where my husband is. Is he at Suzette's? Weird. Why is he always at her place? I don't know. Strange. My son's really going through a hard time at school. He's getting kicked out of all his clubs. He's getting suspended from school and having a hard time. But I don't know. Like, she's just so passive in her life. And maybe it's just because I have so much distance from the first book. But like, I feel like I remember in the first book, her being such a more interesting character and being so much more active and like a little more badass energy to her. And then I feel like in these 2 books that have followed that, she has gotten so boring. So for all of those reasons, I ended up giving it a 2-star. I did think it was really readable. I read it in like 2 sittings or so. It was a little bit of a palate cleanser, just looking for something that could be an easy read, something I could get through quickly, but it really did not feel like it added a ton to the series to me personally. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know down below what you thought of this book, if you've read it, and if you've read any of the other books in the series. So far, I have not heard anything about if the series will be continued or not, but it just kind of feels like it will. It kind of feels like she's gonna write another book, and I think I'll be the sucker who reads it. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!